Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals.
Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast. I'm Bryce Wild, co-founder of the DNA company. And if you're here, you're probably passionate about optimizing your health, just like us. Today's episode is all about hormones, how they shape our health, energy, and aging. And we'll dive deep into personalized approaches that can transform how you think, how you feel, and how you live. You know, an estimated 85% of women experience perimenopause and menopause symptoms like hot flashes, weight gain, brain fog, and fatigue, just to name a few. Recognizing this is a rite of passage, and it's a gradual, personal transition. It's key in order to take proactive steps for a smoother journey. And joining us is Dr. Jennifer Pearlman. She's a globally recognized expert in women's hormone health and anti-aging medicine. Dr. Pearlman's an internationally recognized expert in women's health, aging, hormone therapy, and serving right now as director of the Women's Health Faculty at the Geneva College of Longevity Science, where she leads cutting-edge research and education on hormone health and regenerative medicine. And with a focus on personalized approaches, Dr. Pearlman's work integrates functional medicine, genetics, and advanced hormone therapies to improve women's health across all stages of life. As a thought leader in her field, she's dedicated to empowering women with the tools and knowledge to thrive through hormonal transitions, such as perimenopause, menopause, and to age gracefully with optimal vitality. Her contributions to the field have earned her a reputation as one of the foremost authorities in hormone health and anti-aging therapies. And of course, we're also joined by my co-host, Cheryl Hickey, who will share her personal journey with her own hormone health stories that will, I'm sure, resonate with many of you. And of course, as usual, the goal with this podcast is to empower you to take control of your health and energize your life by making informed choices about what you can manage. However, it's really important to remember that the insights and any advice that comes out of this podcast that we share here today are meant to be complete and not replace the personalized guidance that you might receive from your doctor, therapist, or other healthcare professional. Hey, guys.
Hi, that was a great intro.
Well, it was a very short. Given Dr. Pearlman's long bio, I shortened it very significantly. And there's about 18,000 letters after her name, so I omitted that purposely. Otherwise, it would just be, I would say the intro, and then it would be the outro.
And then we're done. And then that's really it. No, listen, I'm so excited, Dr. P's here for sure.
Yeah, it's so, and you know, guys, before we dive deep in today's discussion, let me just set the stage a little further. Like, obviously, this episode is so important.
Yeah.
We're here to explore the power of personalized hormone health. You know, hormones affect everything. Both of you guys agree: energy, mood, sleep, the way we age. But here's the thing, and here's what we're going to emphasize today, is that no people are the same. And what works for one person may not work for another, which is why, of course, personalized approaches are key, and Dr. Pearlman does what she does. But we thought it would be really wonderful, Cheryl, of course, and you've agreed to this, that you might share your own personal hormone health journey, your real life insight into how you experienced what you experienced, how you found your balance, how Dr. Pearlman was involved with that, maybe a couple of cents that I contributed to that.
Yeah.
Why don't we just launch right into the life of Cheryl Hickey in the backseat?
The kind of just went boom, actually, is sort of what it felt like, what happened. I mean, I get a lot of questions almost daily about what am I using? What am I doing? And then over the last year, a lot of questions have come up about hormone health. But I think I have to go back a little bit sort of to explain the journey I've been on over the last year or so. So in 2023, my dad passed away. Our dad passed away. And not long after that, the show that I had worked on for over 20 years came to an end. Well, at the place that I had worked had come to an end. And while all of that was sort of happening, those transitions were all happening, and a lot of grief and, you know, really going inward and trying to figure out what this all means, I was also going through perimenopause. Now, I've come to learn and understand I was probably going through it far before all of that. And I was experiencing, like many other women, irregular periods, waking up at 3 a.m. I wasn't having any hot flashes. So to me, which is interesting, I didn't equate that it would be perimenopause because I wasn't having hot flashes. We all think that that's, at least in my brain, that that is the key symptom to it. But I was waking up at 3 every morning or in the middle of the night, and different things were happening. I was noticing my skin was different, like at the texture of my skin, the quality of my hair was different. There were all these things, and I kept just equating it to, oh, I need to take more omegas, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And I know, Bryce, you and I have been on this, hormone journey, and we've talked about it. Even after I had Jackson, we were discussing all of these things for a very long time. And then my period kind of just disappeared. And that's when, over a year ago, I reached out to Dr. Pearlman. Well, no, let me go back. I went to my family doctor, and I said, something's up. Like, I feel like something's different. And she said, let's go see an endocrinologist. And I was like, great. And I did all the blood work and did all the things. And then we had a call, and the call was, well, you're in perimenopause. It's just where you are. And it kind of went silent on the phone. And I was like, well, okay, well, I know where I am, but like, where are we doing? What am I doing? What? And that was it. And it was like, let's touch base in about 6 months to a year. And I was like, yeah, but I'm waking up at 3. I'm having to function. My life is in turmoil. Like this, that's just not it didn't feel like an answer. So if many people know me, I ask a lot of questions. I'm incredibly curious by nature. And I was already a patient of Dr. Pearlman's for skincare, rejuvenation reasons. And then we started down this, I asked her if she could take a look at my hormones. And since then, we have been working together. I don't like the word balancing my hormones because there's no such thing as balance for women. It's just not a thing, and everyone needs to stop saying it. There's no balance. But we started down this hormone replacement journey that I can comfortably say, for me, not for other people, but I feel like my old self again. And when I say old self, I mean like 5-10 years ago, Cheryl. I'm sleeping better than I have in years. I have more energy, and I feel like very creative, and I'm firing, and I'm doing. I can keep up with my kids. There's a bounce in my step that hasn't been there for a while. Now, it's taken time for Dr. Pearlman and I to get things because, it goes up and it goes down. So, Dr. Pearlman, I think that's where I'll lean it over to you. Can you share a little bit about our journey together? I think we need to hear from you too.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. And I think it's extraordinarily important and generous and courageous, actually, of you with your platform and audience to be so open, forthright, and share. However, I will say, you and I have laughed. I mean, menopause is hot. Like all of a sudden, women, especially women who do have a platform, are probably more comfortable than ever sharing their hormonal tribulations and experiences on this journey.
Well, I'll have to say though this, I was not necessarily, I was worried about it. And listen, I talked to my agent even and was like, is this okay? Because we're still in that world. And I know we can pretend we're not, but we are still in that world a bit. So it is, I'm not super comfortable with talking about it. I'm talking about it here.
Well, all the more reason to give you a little this.
I trust B and the platform, but I know it's going to be helpful.
I want to say kudos as well before Dr. Pearlman continues on. Like, there's a lot of things that play a role, including career being at the peak, raising children. You're part of the sandwich generation. We all are. You're looking at your spouse potentially. I'm not saying you did, Cheryl, but a lot of folks out there wondering who they are. And I'll just sort of say before going back to Dr. Pearlman, because I know what happens next is she found a phone booth, changed into Superwoman, and came back out and saved the day with you. But at the end of the day, I'm a guy. And I don't experience this, nor will I. But I do have a significant appreciation for what you women go through, and I've studied the, the biology of it, and of course the genomics of it as well. And of course, Dr. Pearlman, back to the pendulum shifting, right? Mm-hmm. Due to the WHI studies, it used to be that everyone was on HRT, then nobody was. And now it seems like it's returning. How did you help Cheryl in this case?
Well, I would say coming back, I think, as you pointed out, Bryce, Cheryl's experience is actually unique, but not unique in the sense that our, hormone crisis, this, impending doom, so to speak, of the symptoms of menopause. Cheryl discussed some early symptoms, which were not clearly associated with hormones and menopause, because it was sleep and mood, and it was a time when she was grieving and experiencing other changes and stress. And as you point out, Bryce, for so many women, the hormonal fluxes and transition of perimenopause is happening as their career is pinnacling and they're struggling with aging, or sadly, in Cheryl's case, my heart goes out to you with empathy, the loss of a parent in the career. So it is often hard to tweeze out what's what. But I think your experience in the conventional medical arena, where you did seek care and there weren't solutions, really speaks to the need for a much more proactive approach, female-centric approach, holistic approach, personalized approach. And we're all going to get to like even a genomically driven approach to help particularly women age their best. To do that requires an expertly guided proactive approach through the menopause transition, which is really not an event.
Yeah. Where do women start? Like I went to my doctor. Maybe it was me. Maybe I didn't articulate right. I'm pretty good, but what language should women use when they know in their mind and their body, and maybe their partners know as well, something's not right? What's the language that will get the ball moving?
Well, I would say before we talk language, let's talk about when, what, and how, how being partly language. So when, I tell patients, usually never too early, never too late, but at 40. For most women by 40, some form of a baseline. That's when I would recommend advanced women's health screening. So back to the what should women ask for? Well, talk to your medical provider, your doctor. What kind of advanced screening is available to you? For instance, although it is not the provincial guideline here where we are in Ontario, the cancer guidelines and the American guidelines do recommend breast cancer screening starting at the age of 40. And along with that, some kind of blood work. And there is no one test, but just some touch point as to what is going on. And, we're talking here mostly about female sex hormones, but women have more testosterone than estrogen in our bodies. There are other fluxes with hormones that we want to consider as well. Hormones are like a symphony orchestra. So thyroid, adrenal, our androgens, our male sex hormones, everything needs to be in balance. And you might not get all of that, but just something. And, our system will take you so far. And then complementing is why we refer to it as complementary medicine, whether it's nutrition, to Bryce, like the other types of providers that may complement. But start around the age of 40. And for most women, they will, in the next 5 years, enter perimenopause. On average, menopause is going to occur at the age of 50. But one of the reasons, you might have not been, I don't think it's like you weren't taken seriously, but, you're not there. And such that our conventional toolkit of standard hormone therapy,
I'm an early bird.
No, but you weren't postmenopausal. That was the issue. Right, like the conventional treatment is like, we'll deal with you when you're a year after your periods have ended. And until then, grin and bear it. And that's not how we work in my model. I always talk about, it's a partnership. We're going to be proactive. We're going to be personalized meaning your preferences, precision meaning your genomics and other kinds of biomarkers to help you prevent not only disease, but risk factors and age your very best.
And so that's so enlightening. And I think that maybe for folks to really acknowledge and understand how to proceed as first steps, because this is exactly where we should be, is discussing how do we approach. Language is key, but also who are you presenting to? So just for clarity's sake, Dr. Pearlman, there's a significant difference between a conventionally trained family physician and somebody like yourself in functional medicine who takes a special interest in hormone therapy, both from the inside and out. And, we have this saying in functional medicine that I know that maybe you can extend on, especially as it relates to Cheryl, and that is that biography becomes biology. So who are we talking to? And then maybe a little bit more about, that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I wear a lot of different hats. For almost a decade, I helped run the largest menopause clinic in the country, where we almost joked, it's a sad joke, but it was the truth, that the 18-month wait list to be seen at the hospital-based conventional menopause
clinic
right. cured the hot flashes. That was the cure. So, and again, I think where we are now, and Bryce and I have been working in the world of functional medicine for a very long time, is there's a much more openness and understanding to that holistic approach, which it's not only your biology being driven by your life, like your life story, which of course it is, but it's also that we do have the tools and the science to target root cause of disease. And not just apply pills to ills.
Right.
And that is very important as we're talking about, when you think about in the last, to your point, Bryce, the dark ages, the last few years, the dark ages after the misrepresentation of a very poorly I don't want to say it was a poorly designed trial. I'm going to speak to that in a minute. I've been actively involved in women's health and engaged with the principal investigators of that trial. But we think about over the last few years in the wake of the WHI, where doctors were scared about hormones, they had birth control and antidepressants and not a lot of other, options for patients. It was very much deal with the symptoms as opposed to recognizing what the menopause actually is. And if I may, let me just talk about that for a little bit, because I think it'll help frame some of the issues around, like, what are we actually asking for? So when I'm working with a patient, there are three things. And this is what I would encourage all patients to ask for. A treatment plan that addresses symptoms, right? Which is just, that's often what brings people into me, right? Like you, Cheryl, like you described.
Help me with my symptoms.
About sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep, mood. For many women later in the process, without a proactive plan that starts in perimenopause, hot flashes, night sweats, sleep disturbance, vaginal dryness, sexual complaints. All of these are the symptoms of menopause. That's often what brings the patient into me. But just beneath that, equally important, if not more, is this rapid increase in the risk of the chronic diseases of aging.
Right.
Because this is what ensues for women. It does occur for men as well, but with a different timeline and sequence. But women with a rapid loss of ovarian hormones and the other issues that arise at midlife, we now know it's not only the ovary, it's also the surge in the brainstem hormones that are driving disease risk.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I'm talking about the big, the dark horseman, Peter Attia likes to say, the big things we worry about, whether it's heart disease, osteoporosis, bone loss, dementia, brain loss, diabetes, metabolic derangement, and cancer. And we think about that emerging risk, that saying, I know, Bryce, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So when we think about the timeline to these diseases, the inception is actually a woman's menopause, right? 5 years to breast cancer, 10 years to heart disease, and 20 years to the unfortunate, very common outcome with dementia. 2/3 of all cases of dementia are women. So that's number two. And number three is that it's not just disease risk, it's rapid aging. Rapid aging. And again, as you alluded to, Cheryl, because I have I treat whole health from the inside out, the outside in, we see it. So I see it all the time on the face.
Your
Rapid
skin
facial
changes.
aging. Yeah. The mouth, the jowl, the body, the belly. So these physical changes are very much tied to the hormonal change of menopause. And again, the idea that it's not just a hot flash and it's not just bone health, but ideas that a woman may have in a very personalized way around being proactive about the aging process. And a woman's plan and health status in many ways, her physical fitness, her hormonal profile in her 40s, in those perimenopausal years, will set her up for success for the decades to come and determine her physical and cognitive vitality in our 80s and beyond. Absolutely. And actually, that's something I think a lot about. So the woman cares about her hot flash, and I'm thinking about her 80-year-old brain. So
Yeah, I
I
love
think
it.
that language is
And you're
really
thinking about our skin, which we
and the
also love.
skin and
Well,
vagina and
you know,
everything.
and I'm hell-bent before we're done today to
Yeah.
ask you, Dr. Pearlman, for your list. And people can grab a pen and paper, or they'll come back to our website and the show notes, and they'll write this list. This is a list that not only now have you found the right functional doctor who's got vested interest in the process, what to look for and how to look for it, but you also know the language and sort of how to approach the individual. You've got those three pointed facts there. And then,
So one thing as you're thinking about what is that list, I think really key, and I didn't say this, but in speaking about women's health and certainly in the prescribing of hormone therapy, because, hormones are signals. They're long range and short range signals of health, life, vitality, and risk and disease, and need to be prescribed and monitored with a medical doctor that has the scope to do things like your mammogram, your breast exam, your gynecologic exam. Yeah. And I think that's really important that there's, these days hormones can be found on the internet. Yeah. And this is not a DIY thing. Well, and it's not a cookie cutter approach.
That leads into, is hormone replacement for everyone? I know that I've done, and I've talked about this before, I've done my DNA test with the DNA company. Yeah. And we talk about my methylation. I'm good at a lot of things. Methylation is not my jam. But we know that that's something that I need to be aware of. How important is it to know, like, is HRT or is hormone replacement therapy for everyone? Is it bioidentical? Is it, I think that's a big question people have too.
Yeah. And I think, that you touch on a few things in your share there, which is first that one size does not fit all. And we are operating as providers, as healthcare providers, Bryce and I for a long time, but in a new era of personalized medicine. But I would say that hormone health is for everyone. And everyone, women and men, deserve a hormonal plan to be proactive about this key facet of particularly midlife aging, and particularly for women, because women have the rapid loss of ovarian hormones like estrogen. And this, if not dealt with in a proactive way, can lead to an extraordinary amount of rapid aging and disease risk if not managed. So to your point, well, if hormone health is for everyone, how do we approach that and how do we deliver it? Yeah. Well, first and foremost, a comprehensive health assessment. That'll mean different things to different people. So your GP is not going to do whole genome testing and look at things like methylation likely, but hopefully they'll be open to maybe your share if you've got that information like you did. To recognize that while hormone health is for everyone, if for someone like you, which is actually very common, Cheryl, to find patients that have, these genetic blocks. It's not that you can't methylate, it's that you're not as good at methylating as hosting TV shows and doing podcasts.
Nice one.
And, all the other things that you are extraordinary at. But it is like I talk about the factory line. It's something where providing more substrate, right? More material, raw material, and maybe a few extra workers, we can overcome some of these, susceptibilities or vulnerabilities. Yeah. I like to talk to my patients about you have genetic gifts and genetic risks, and it's just going to help us fine tune your plan. And we're not talking about the, big bad genes. We're not talking about genomics like BRCA that have a high penetrance of disease risk. We're really talking here about lifestyle-based genetics. Okay. That is news we, doctor patient, can use to shape precision medicine. So when we think about what are the other biomarkers, what are the other health indicators we want to consider when we're designing this personalized plan, it is going to start with a health history. Age and stage, age like biologic age and stage, very important, a cycle history, past hormonal events. Did you have issues in pregnancy, postpartum, PMS, hormonal migraine, really get the feel for what's been going on. Your health history is really important. There's a lot without even one fancy test that you can surmise just from that. Family histories to some extent. I'll give you an example. And we talked about this. Although the gene has not yet been identified, DNA company, get on it, please. We do know that a mother having had both an early menopause, which is defined as 45 or earlier, or a very symptomatic menopause, which is defined actually as more than 3 flashes a day and more than 1 night sweat per night. So like there is a way we evaluate that. That is a predictor that you, her daughter, will also experience potentially either of these, early menopause or symptomatic menopause. We
So
also
what's
know
amazing about that is my mom
yeah,
went in very early, in her early 40s.
yeah,
And not only that, she had horrendous symptoms, like really, really bad. And she talks about it now in a way where she says, you know, there were times where she said, like, I just felt like I was going crazy. She said, my
yeah,
body was itchy. I
yeah,
was not sleeping. And so, knowing what I did know also,
yeah.
I was determined to search for answers for myself and for my daughter too, and for people who follow me to figure out how to maybe have a different course of action, knowing like she and I have a lot of things that are very similar. So, and
Mhm.
sure enough, I ended up going into all of it earlier as well. But the one main difference is I am not having the unbearable symptoms because we're managing it the way we are.
Actively,
And I
yeah.
recognize that.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you kind of talked about that piece of your own story, because remember, you started out, you had this really stressful kind of time of life,
Yeah.
extraordinarily stressful beyond the general stress of just being, mom and daughter and career and all the things.
Yeah.
And, stress can induce early menopause, extreme
I wanted
duress.
to ask you about that because
Yeah.
my mom told me that, and I was like, it can't be. So stress can cause early menopause.
Yes, and we see this. So I'll give you examples. Women that move from a different country without life supports, we often see that. Women like survivors of horrible traumas, the evolutionary pressure to not
Wow.
ovulate when a woman is under extreme psychological or physical duress, can precipitate early menopause. But I think in your case,
Wow.
there's this like combination, like as is mostly the case, of
Yeah.
genetics and environment. So you had the environmental pressure of a higher stress burden at that
Yeah.
time, but also some kind of genetic predisposition. And again, there is not one gene. So I am in no way suggesting you can go get the gene for early menopause. No, but we know that there is an inheritability with a
Right.
mother's having had an early menopause. So you kind of had this like almost double-edged sword
I had a
that
storm.
tilted
I had a
you
storm.
that way. But thank goodness, and I see this a lot with my patients. I'm blessed with extraordinary patients like you, because they come to find me, right? They're not referred to me for surgery and pills for ills. They're seeking a proactive approach. So I have a very empowered patient base like you.
Yeah.
You knew there was an option to be proactive. You've been working with Bryce. You know there's more than pills for ills. You knew that you could perhaps get ahead of things. That mindset. I think this is much more the
And I
case
think the world's
than a
opening up to
generation
that
ago.
too. Don't you
Yes.
think, Bryce? The world's
Well, I
opening
think
up to
I think there's
realizing.
this. Yeah, I think that long has there been preventive. The a pound is worth, or an ounce is worth a pound of cure. To go full circle to that, and I think that there's precision, the genetics, and now I think there's a third P to add, which is participatory. And I think
Yes.
people are catching on to that. And I think that there's no more hand holding or God, a doctor is God. It's who's a part of your team. There's something that we can never include everything here, but I feel remiss if we didn't also mention environmental toxins. It's a day and age now where hormone mimickers, and of course how well you detoxify, are playing a role. These are hundreds of times more influential than our own hormones, and it's all very complicated, but it's knowable. So here, I'm gonna shoot myself later if I don't get to this list that I got to hear on behalf of all women out there listening from Dr. Pearlman, and that is here are the hormones I need checked perhaps after the genetics. And so the DNA company, we feel like understanding executive function, mood, and behavior, which is what you guys were just talking about, understanding hormone. Because what Dr. Pearlman said at the beginning was very powerful. estrogen's not a female thing. You just you have a lot more of it in you, a lot more receptors in you than I do as a
And
male.
it's all over the place.
But it's right. It's which, by the way, may have a lot to do with the genes likely involved in the vasomotor, phenomenon, right? Which is the reason why you have hot flashes when estrogen tanks and we don't. And those genes are probably predictive to some degree as you go in earlier or later. We don't have those yet, but I promise you we're working on it, Dr. Pearlman. But at the end of the day, it's the speed at which most of us transition enzymatically, regulated by genes, these various hormones. But then also there are things, as you mentioned, earlier, Cheryl, methylation. There's a whole there's a whole slew of these different pathways which we appreciate. Never a single gene, but all these very complex pathways which together set the stage for one's predisposition. By the way, of not only how they manage their hormones, but there's a lot of predictability that comes in from a genetic test that we run at the DNA company. It's called the DNA 360 that we did for you, Cheryl, that basically helps us to understand, where have you come from as a female? Are you more of that estrogen dominant or androgen dominant female? Because we see a significant difference as to the way you enter into peri, and then of course,
which I was dominant, I believe.
But I would just jump on there for a sec, and I like how you asked that, Bryce, with the I think about the different chapters in the Book of Life, and the genome is just the first chapter of the Book of Life. It's a very long book, and it's not actually a reality, right? It is a potential set of risks and gifts and susceptibilities that will be shaped through epigenomics or gene environment interactions, environment being outside things, whether you mention it's, perhaps toxic exposures, or inside things like hormones and the microbiome and nutrition. So all of this shapes how our genes get expressed into the epigenome. And then, from there, we can start looking at your phenotype. A phenotype is a medical term. It means like your reality. So to your question, I would say the genomics is interesting, but you cannot surmise that a woman's estrogen level is anything actually until you actually evaluate her. And unfortunately, we're limited in how we can do that because whole blood levels of testosterone or estrogen don't tell me, Cheryl, what I actually want to know about you. What's in your breast? What's in the brain? What's in, your liver? What are your metabolic risks? It's a whole body approximation that we use in combination. So genomics, a phenotypic test like blood levels, a clinical assessment, because that'll be the best way to evaluate your tissue hormone levels. And by the way, there is only one tissue test that is the true test of your tissue estrogen level, and that is a vaginal exam. So the status of your vaginal mucosa, which is actually quite akin, like we were joking before, but speak all over the world, is how these lips and the other lips are very similar. So we see rapid aging here, right? The fine lines, dryness of the mouth. Women often complain of dry mouth, dry eyes, and vaginal dryness. And that is a very good predictor. So a vaginal exam, a breast exam, and then imaging. And so Bryce, you asked me, what would I suggest you go get? I think if you are empowered enough to get a genomic profile to guide things, that's incredible. It's like amazing. The set of information points you're going to get on a DNA's 360 report is going to be so helpful as first chapter. You want a phenotypic profile, which is going to be blood over time. So again, the conventional thought is no blood test is necessary, just a year without a period, and the preferences of the patient. And that is not the case. So I said earlier, I would start at 40. And this is just a general rule of thumb, but nothing is generalized. So starting at 40, get a baseline. Through a woman's early 40s, on average, this is the convergence of the late reproductive years and the beginning of perimenopause. And women, Cheryl and I, women in their 40s know this is where biologic and chronologic age start to really differ. It means in your friend group, you're going to have some women that are still having regular cycles, feeling great, and some that are now not menstruating and may have reached.
Or they're having really heavy periods. I'm seeing more and more in that in my friend group.
So that's going to be, that's like that, exactly that time, late reproductive aging, early perimenopause. So the cycle might be still happening every month, bleeding patterns are changing. For some women, it's often heavy flooding, but for shorter duration. And the cycle itself may shorten from like typical 28 days down to even like 25 or so. Some women start missing periods. Once you miss 2 periods in a row, that's where you're late perimenopause. So 2 periods in a row is how we clinically define it, but I match that with a profile. So, you know, when you say, Bryce, what would you ask to test? I would say, well, the test is only worth its weight in the monitoring. Has to be done, certainly, not genomics, by the way, not your genetics or your genetics.
DNA is one and done. DNA informs, in my opinion, the focus on those repeated tests over time. And when I say one and done, your genes don't change.
Yeah. Although having worked with the company over a long period of time, more and more is available on how we can, like what we can know and how we can use it.
Science changes, science improves. But the most empowering thing I want people to hear is that you can manage, as your earlier point, that's what epigenetics, you can manage genetic expression so long as you're really starting to look at the right things. And that becomes that sort of functional approach. Doing pelvic exams, doing the full deep dive, osteoporosis prevention by looking at maybe a bone density screen, by doing a DEXA, looking in. And so that's the trip I want to sort of just share. Is there some fallacy, or is it justified to look into blood work and do the complete beyond LH and FSH? And maybe estrogen? Is there purpose to progesterone, pregnenolone, DHEA, bioavailable testosterone, et cetera? What's that laundry list of things that?
Well, I would say, I mean, there's so many things you can test and know, but the most critical, the most kind of focused here would be in the second half of the cycle, which we refer to as the luteal phase. So day 21, evaluating whether most of these patients we're talking about are going to be in their perimenopause. Are you ovulating or not? Not all bleeding is ovulatory. Some of your friends, Cheryl, and many of my patients who have flooding and irregular bleeding are not ovulating. By the way, lots of young women in their 30s have PCO and other, and ovulatory or conditions that are associated with the lack of ovulation. So to figure out, is the patient ovulating? Yes, Bryce, to your point, we want to do some, hormonal testing on repeat, because one cycle is just one cycle. In the second half of the cycle, day 21 on average, but it's timed to a woman's cycle. If you have a short cycle, it might be day 17. We would look at FSH as a predictor of your perimenopausal status. That's that. I was talking about the brainstem hormone. We would look at LH. The ratio of those two can predict hormonal imbalances like PCO. We would look at estradiol, which, by the way, estrogen is an umbrella term. There are 3 primary estrogens in the female body. I test them all, but I'm not necessarily, I don't think you need to go ask your GP to go test them all. Again, it's not for me to say what should your provider test, but at the basic, level, timed at the right time of your cycle, FSH, LH, estradiol is your ovary producing estrogen and progesterone. And that would be the core. From that, you can actually evaluate a lot when it's paired with the health history, the story of the woman's bleeding pattern and cycle of the last few years or months, and her symptoms. And then I would typically test again. And that, again, is not next week. It would be, 1 or 2 cycles down the road. I would start with some interventions, and it totally depends on the woman, right? But assuming we're now talking about a perimenopausal woman, job 1 for me is optimize the hormones you're making, optimize your metabolic processes, your detoxification pathways that I am going to depend on, and you are, more importantly, to not only deal with the toxins, the hormones you're making, but anything I in the future may give you. So very important message here is starting a proactive journey is not a prerequisite, or it does not commit you to a prescription for hormone therapy. I actually do not use the word HRT because that word replacement is not the language I like to use.
Right.
I coined this term HOT because women often are hot in many ways, but we're hot with flashes. Hormone optimization therapy. Okay. And hormone optimization therapy may, involve prescriptions that may be always bioidentical, which simply means structurally and functionally the same as what your body is or was once making. Maybe oral, maybe patches, maybe creams. It's very individualized to the stage, the woman, and the hormone. So some hormones we never give orally, and some will give in more than one form at once.
Right.
Question, how long can a woman be on hormone replacement therapy? I feel like that's a big question that a
Yes.
lot of people have.
And one that I would say the answer, even amongst my conventional colleagues, where, as you know, I work conventionally, even their answer is changing. So just like we say, there's not, one size that fits all. It's important to get started with an assessment. Initiating prescriptions, like actual hormonal therapy, is going to be very individualized, but often that's already late perimenopause and may not involve estrogen. It may involve other hormones, Bryce, you mentioned like progesterone, looking at thyroid and other things like the adrenal hormones.
Mhm.
Eventually, estrogen will be prescribed, and that's going to be for women somewhere close to the time of the menopause. Because once you're not ovulating for a long period of time, you are not producing ovarian estrogen, and you, without treatment, will likely experience menopausal symptoms. But how long that continues is going to be very individualized. So first, just for symptoms, it's important to realize that some women don't ever experience a hot flash or night sweats, the conventional symptoms, but that's not typically the case in North America. So there's a study that looks at Taiwanese women, and 80% of them don't experience night sweats and hot flashes, but 80% of North American women do, and half of them are bothered by those symptoms to the point that it disrupts what they're doing.
Right.
So symptoms on average will continue for 5 years after their menopause. So we know that is how we define early postmenopause. And that would be a time where systemic, meaning whole body hormone therapy, is probably going to be indicated by their symptoms. Remember I told you about the other two reasons to think about hormone therapy, disease risk management and healthy aging planning, but just for symptoms, which is, by the way, the conventional indication for hormones.
Yeah.
Just for symptoms, on average, women are going to experience those without treatment for about 5 years after their menopause. Current guidelines are continuing hormone therapies for 10 years to the age of 60 in the conventional way.
So then what happens at 60? Suddenly
but there's
you
no
have
endpoint.
symptoms, or are you good to go?
Prolonged hormone therapy, so this is like beyond your typical journey, would refer to women in their late postmenopausal years. So now we're talking about women, they're more than 10 years after their menopause. For most, they're no longer having hot flashes and night sweats, but they may have other things going on, like sleep disturbance, their performance abilities, whether it's verbal, mental sharpness, their eloquence, or physical and vaginal symptoms. So beyond that, we talk about extended hormone therapy as a personalized choice, where the risk benefit is different and very individualized. And what that should do is change. So hopefully Cheryl will be working together for decades and decades to come, right? Decades and decades. And whatever we do for you now at this stage, for you, it'll be different than 5 years, and certainly different for you than way off when you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s and beyond. So I tell patients, hormones to your grave, like long time out, but it's going to look different. You at menopause will not need the same thing as you in your late postmenopause stage.
So you may be on them forever if that's what you want, but maybe is there a possibility you're going to feel amazing and be like, I don't need it anymore?
Yes, but back to my point, symptom management is only one reason to consider hormone therapy. There's one thing I think all women should think about in the forever range, and that's vaginal estrogen. A vaginal low-dose estrogen is absolutely essential to address the one sure symptom and problem any woman after menopause with low estrogen will experience without treatment, which is vaginal dryness, painful intercourse, and connected to that, an increased risk of things like urinary tract infections and
which can be really dangerous when you're older, right? That can be
preventable. So low dose, local, we call that would be a local vaginal estrogen. Yeah. Very different than the kind of estrogen solution that I would provide systemically or whole body to a woman at the time of her menopause, which in my case would involve not only estrogen, but progesterone as well.
Can I ask you a short question?
And just one last thing, but conventionally the language would be for women with a uterus, they need the progesterone. But for many other reasons, these two, like yin and yang, are perfect complements. They're not opposites, they're perfect complements. And for most women should be prescribed together. Sorry.
Okay, what's hot right now is topical on your face.
Yeah.
Not just because to work for topically. I don't think there's anything legal in Canada, but I know there's a couple of brands in the US. I don't even know if that's the right terminology, but where do you fall on that?
Yeah, well, I'm all over that. So menopause in the skin, we lose, women, 30% of our collagen, skin's collagen content in the 5 years surrounding our menopause. So again, just this connection to hormones, estrogen. I have several published articles on this. So lots more we can dig into how important this connection is. And in addition to all the other things you can do to address skin health, estrogens, not estradiol, can be used to mitigate, like prevent some of that rapid aging that would otherwise occur in perimenopause, through menopause, and beyond for women, but also for men. Because a lot of the longevity and health and brain effects and even sexual effects of testosterone in men actually are through estrogen. So estrogen, like women, we're small and mighty, like small and number and mighty. So estrogen for the skin is a big topic. Now, it's not estradiol. It's nothing like what I would give you to treat your hot flashes. It's not, and this is unfortunately happening, it's not what I would give you to treat vaginal dryness. Do not take the estrogens for your vagina and put them on your face. Even though I did say there are some analogies to facial aging, perioral around the mouth aging, and the aging of the other lips. Here's what is available. It's very interesting. A new era of cosmeceuticals, skin therapies that are based on hormone analogs. So estrogens that are developed as skincare products and fully metabolized, back to genetics, fully metabolized in the skin such that there is no systemic therapy. I am excited and honored to work with the leading scientist that is developing this category and one of the only practitioners in Canada with this type of product.
When's it out?
It is. It's out. It's out.
It's out?
It's coming. Yes. Now, I know you're seeing, on social media, people, again, taking vaginal estrogens or other products. We in Canada actually do compound estriol. So 2 secs on estriol. Estriol is a weak vaginal estrogen. Sorry, estriol is the weak estrogen used for vaginal therapy in other places in the world, but not approved as a government-approved pharmaceutical in North America. It is available as a compounded solution. Estriol is the estrogen of pregnancy, more pregnancy, less breast cancer. And estriol is one of those estrogens that some practitioners, a lot of the ones that I think you're referring to, Cheryl, are talking about for skin health. Yeah. So there's different ways we can go at it. Estriol is a weak estrogen, and I call them soft estrogen analogs, are a skin-specific estrogen. And instead of getting you like product names and the specifics, just understanding that whole body hormones, including estrogen, local solutions like vaginal estrogen, very important, especially for women in those later years, even if they're no longer on systemic hormones, and other topical hormone solutions, both for the skin, but also for hair.
Okay.
We'll talk. I think we need to do a second.
There's so much.
Oh, there's so much stuff. I really appreciate it, in particular, there's a lot of pervasive myths, and how you address them, both with your patients and with Cheryl, is impressive. It's very science rich. Some of them we covered. Menopause happens suddenly, doesn't for all people. Menopause is the same for everybody. It's not. It's heavily dependent on your genetics and other factors, environmental and so forth, that it only affects reproductive health, that it's dangerous. And we know now that it's not. We've come full circle. And of course, that all women experience the long laundry list of symptoms. But Cheryl, I know if there's one question I've always been taught in my in the small amount of media that I've ever done, that if you really want to hit the message home, you got to think about who is listening to the podcast and asking the question to, what they want to hear most. And I hear people yelling at me, ask Cheryl, how did she navigate through the myths and misconceptions across her journey? Were there surprises? Yeah. I know we don't have Dr. Pearlman forever. We're going to wrap this up. Yeah. But what were those and how did you do it?
Well, I think it's really confusing out there with social media. It's really, really wonderful. And then there's a lot of misinformation, and we know that. And I think there's people get angry at other people for sharing information that they just, and really at the end of the day, everyone's trying to help. And I think that's number one thing. But I think as a person, you have to go and find someone that you trust, a provider, if that's your family doctor or functional medicine doctor, whoever it is, find someone that you trust and start from there. And also listening to your gut and listening to the signals of your body have been really important for me. If I know what I still feel off, we have a discussion about it. That's really it. It's advocating for yourself. We all advocate for our parents. We advocate for our kids. We advocate for our partners, but we forget to advocate for ourselves. Yeah. We've lost it somewhere. By this time, I just think we're all so tired. We're just like, whatever.
Well, and
that's important.
And those are key. Those are key. And let's say now you're advocating for yourself and you've heard Dr. Pearlman. Dr. Pearlman, what are the barriers? I mean, and if it's finding somebody like you, how can we overcome that barrier? How can people advocate for themselves?
Well, Cheryl, you shared a story with me, and I have to say, it is so sad. And I respect all of my incredible colleagues in conventional medicine, but it's so sad some of the stories I hear from patients that really the door was closed, like, grin and bear it, like left on their, or a case of a woman with early menopause. So I said that's before the age of 45. Yeah. The gold standard is to be on top of that and proactively treat that. Those women experience not only very symptomatic menopause, but have extraordinary risk associated with that for things like heart disease and bone loss. So to your point, as a consumer, ultimately patients are consumers, know that nothing is not your only option. And it may take you being proactive and asking questions, as Cheryl's really good at. I mean, it is your job, but you are really good at it. And you ask questions, and you're going to have to take, as we all are, some accountability and ownership in putting together our health journey here. And, you said participatory. I use the word in my 5P model of it's a partnership. It is a partnership. Yeah. And paternalistic is what conventional medicine was when I was brought up a long time ago, 2 decades ago, as, a medical aspiring medical doctor. And I have come to realize that this new era of personalized precision medicine must be delivered within a trusted partnership that is bi-directional. I learn from my patients all the time. And even if you looked at my patients and thought, women between these ages, every story is unique. Every story is unique.
It's also why we call it a practice.
But you know what else is not unique and I wish would change is that there's a statistic out that I saw the other day that there's 2 billion women going through menopause at this moment. Yet in medical school, when a lot of doctors are asked how much study did you get on perimenopause and menopause, the fact that there is not an ample amount of study on what happens to every single woman, it enrages me. And I don't understand that, given that perimenopause and menopause affect so many other things, your brain health, your heart health, all of the things, the family unit alone.
Well, medicine is siloed.
When is that going to change? It's all the onus is on women to go fight and go get it. And then you have to pay extra and do all the things.
Yeah.
But when
medicine is siloed, right? And if you think of the one specialty devoted to women, they are not. They are devoted, gynecologists, obstetricians are devoted to delivering babies, treating women only when they're pregnant, and removing pathology surgically, right? Gynecologists are surgeons.
Yeah.
Who is caring for women and helping them age well? Unfortunately, in our medical system, things are very siloed off and disease focused, but that is changing. And I can tell you, this might be a good time for us to regroup, but I am off next week to the preeminent Menopause Women's Health meeting in Chicago. This is the world meeting. It is bigger and better than ever. And for the first time, we'll be faculty and helping to lead the first Women's Health Summit. Things are changing, Cheryl, and women like you who are willing to share their story and use a platform to amplify not only the message of, what the issues are, but the need for more will be part of the solution. And maybe just as a final thought, if I can share this concept, because I think this is extraordinary and amazing and very empowering. I have to say we, Cheryl, Bryce, we will be the first generation of women, but you, Bryce, too, as humans, we are the only species, other than a whale species, that outlives their menopause, their reproductive life. Yeah. And why that is, actually, as moms, we can both, look to this, is in part because of the benefit of grandmotherhood on our species. And not only are humans virtually one of the only species, one of two, to outlive their menopause, which just reinforces for us how important that time of life is. But we will be the first cohort of women to do that by more than a factor of 1. Wow. So my goal with you and all my patients is to do it by way more than just the factor.
Oh, yeah, I've got lots to do. We have a show coming up. There's so many things, all of us. Bryce,
yes, but that's really exciting.
We're going to need a part 2.
Powerful conversation today, guys. It was only part 1. There will be a part 2, and it'll be Dr. Pearlman's learning from the annual Preeminent Summit. Also, that'll be what fuels it. So
men
actually,
like
folks,
you, Bryce, are really important, though, also to all of this. I think that the more men that are interested and care and ask the questions and get involved with their partners is so important to empowering a woman to go and do the things she needs to do. So I say thank you to you and to all the men out there who are standing with women as we go through these times.
Every man has a mother, a daughter, maybe a sister, and the hormonal stories that we're sharing apply to them as well, just in a different sequence and timeline.
Yeah. Do you know what I did, just as a quick anecdote before we wrap? Just to better understand what a hot flash or what comes along with estrogen plummet and vasomotor experience for a woman. And any guy can do this under the guidance of a doctor. Don't do it on your own, and don't do it as an experiment without permission from your doctor, as the caveat. But I took a high dose niacin to experience a niacin flush. And I wanted to better empathize, better understand what that is. And trust me, it's incredibly intense. And so that's just a little,
but that's only one piece of the hot flash a woman would experience. Her brain
but I love that you tried.
Well, so I think that really to get the best out of a part 2 with Dr. Pearlman and everything that she learns and brings back to us is for folks to submit their questions in the comment below on the YouTube channel so that we can answer them, in part as part 2. So if there's one takeaway from my perspective, it's that understanding your unique hormonal blueprints, the key to living a balanced, vibrant life. We offer this at the DNA company. It's called the DNA 360 that arms you to ask certain questions and then follow somebody. By the way, the Institute of Functional Medicine, where you'll find Dr. Pearlman, Institute of Functional Medicine, ifm.org, is where you find doctors like her. So whether you're navigating perimenopause, exploring hormone replacement therapy, or you're just trying to optimize your health, personalized care makes all the difference. I want to thank you again, Cheryl, for your personal journey. We're going to dive into it even deeper. And you yourself, Dr.
You know what we should do? We should give people my code too if they want it as another gift.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Cheryl.
Yeah.
Cheryl H, right? Make sure you get the H at the end, all capitals.
Hot. Cheryl Hot.
There you go. This guy, it's the type of information that can transform lives, really. Yeah. So everybody at home, we hope it empowers you. Stay tuned for part 2. And if you're ready to dive deeper on your own hormonal health, please obviously visit Dr. Pearlman's website, which is pearlrejuvenation.com. That's a whole bunch of resources and explore. Also, our DNA 360 test at thednacompany.com. And remember, this podcast is just the beginning, so be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and follow us on Instagram at DNA Talks Podcast, and you'll never miss an episode. Thanks so much for everyone joining us. Until next time, keeping your life the best, most vibrant you can, rooted in your DNA.